When I originally designed my system, I wasn't confident it was going to be a good investment. To lower my risk, I designed the system to never overproduce. That minimizes my initial investment and optimizes my payback time. Now the system has nearly paid for itself, and it is easy to see how it's going to be worthwhile to add some more capacity. My goal is to increase my solar production and get as close as possible to net zero over the course of a year. I also needed to expand so I could add more configuration options. That way I can test standard and bifacial panels back to back and more inverter solutions like the SunGold Power split phase all-in-one SunGold inverter that I'll be testing today. Welcome back to Projects with Everyday Dave. Let's add more power. My oldest son Jordan is not going to be able to help me as much for the next few years. He graduated this spring with high honors from Cedarville University with a degree in electrical engineering and minors in computer science, math, and Bible. He's now in Texas working towards his PhD in electrical engineering. Just imagine all the stuff we're going to be able to do once he finishes that degree. But hey, my daughter's getting married this fall, and so I have some help from Josiah, my future son-in-law. He's working on his computer science degree, and he's the one who created my new website, projectswithdave.com, so be sure and check out his handiwork. In a previous video, we worked together to extend the racking to make space for an additional 8 panels. All of my new panels are 390-watt Canadian Solar bifacial panels. And based on my previous test results, I know they perform better higher up off the ground. So we removed the top row of 375-watt Mission solar panels and shifted them to the bottom, and then filled the whole top with bifacial panels. In order to compare the SunGold string inverter to my SolarEdge system, I've divided my array into 4 quadrants. A top right string with bifacials with optimizers, and a bottom right string of standard panels with optimizers. Then the top left and bottom left will each be separate series strings for the SunGold inverter. Now here's the rub. I only have 2 pair of conductors running from my array to the house. But don't worry, past Dave was looking out for future Dave when he did the original install by placing an additional conduit in the ground for future expansion. Thanks, past Dave. I stubbed out the extra conduit right above the ground, so I just have to paint and assemble the pieces of conduit going up the side of the building. I'm using a specialized paint that is designed just for plastic. I used that several years ago on the conduit that's on the wall, and it is performing very well. Now, you could just leave the conduit exposed. It is stable. However, it does get a little bit chalky over time, and with the white paint, it blends directly into the trim on the building and just pretty much disappears. Even though I only need 2 more sets of conductors for this expansion, in order to look out for future Dave, who always seems to be adding something new, I'm going to add an additional 4 sets of conductors in my spare conduit to bring my total available number of strings to 6. I'm sure future Dave will appreciate that. To make things a little easier to track, I'm using red for 2 of the positive conductors and blue for the other 2 positive conductors. My run is a little over 200 feet, and my spools of wire are 500 foot of 10 gauge THHN, so I'll get 2 runs out of each spool. To do that, I'm placing a stake 250 feet away and unspooling the entire roll in a big U around the stake. Let's see how well that ends up working. That way I can pull all of the ends of the wires through the conduit, and the exact remainder will be a U at the end I can cut off and have maximized the amount of leftover material. Wait. Okay, wait. I can't pull it. Well, if you think about it, I'm trying to drag 4, 30-pound rolls of copper across the ground. What if we put these? Okay, go. Now go your way. Well, this strategy of dragging the bundle across the grass and feeding it into the conduit while Josiah pulled from the other side worked sufficiently well for a while. We were able to pull about 2/3 of the distance, and then the bundle of wire got completely stuck. You stuck? Stuck. Uh-oh. And I couldn't for the life of me pull it either way. Even with both of us trying to pull it back out, we could not move it. All right, those of you who have pulled wire before have been laughing at me since I started doing this because you knew what was gonna happen. And you were right, I got halfway through and it is stuck. I cannot pull it either way. And I should have been using some lubricant. So now I've got to try and pour some down here to get this loose enough so I can pull it back out and lubricate the whole thing. Maybe. Otherwise, I guess I'm digging it up. And present Dave is not very happy with past Dave right now. So, here we go. Try some lubricant. It's not runny.
Make it liquid.
I'm not gonna run anywhere.
Because if you can get it liquid without being too hot, you can pour it down there.
Yeah. Try and warm it up a little bit. Yeah! Got it! Woohoo! Okay, now you get on this end. It's all gross.
It's not moving.
There we go. Okay, here we go. Well, it doesn't look like it was, you know, overly snagging on things. This looks pretty roughed up, so that was dragging, I'm sure. All right, try number 2. Let's add some lubricant this time. Hopefully this works. Oh, I'm so glad we got this back out. I thought we were stuck. I will add lubricant as we go. Too bad I don't have a lubricant sponsor. This would have been the perfect video. Okay, wait. The lubricant did solve the problem, and we were able to pull the bundle through the entire run without too much more trouble. You're almost there? Yeah!
Dirt and rocks.
There was rocks in it.
Fun to pull through.
Well, we got to pull enough to get up there yet. We did it. Oh, sorry. I had the lube. Okay, that was a bear. Lesson learned, if you're pulling a long run with a whole bunch of conductors, use some lubricant. Pro tip, except I'm not a pro. But that would be a pro tip. The remainder of the run into the garage was pretty easy. We just slid the vertical pieces on and stood them up against the trim. Then I drilled the pass-through hole into the garage and secured the conduit to the building. Okay, maybe not a total breeze, but way easier than digging a whole additional trench. I'm really glad I thought ahead and placed a spare conduit in the trench. Now let's add the new combiner boxes. To manage all of these new lines running from my array to the house, I'm going to use 2 of these Vevor enclosures. And I chose this one because it's indoor-outdoor, UL listed NEMA 4 cabinet. You can get multiple sizes. They're easily obtained on Amazon. Usually I'm looking for the smallest, lowest cost enclosure I can possibly use, but in this case, it's going to be more than just a junction box. I'll still be using the Dinkel DIN rail terminal blocks that I usually use in my junction boxes, and I can mount those on the base panel in the cabinet. But in addition to that, I'm going to be having some sets of breakers. And the reason being, for these long strings that'll be as much as 600 volts, I need to be able to turn them off. I do not want to be in a situation where I could possibly touch conductors that are at 600 volts. That would be really dangerous. In my past systems, I used either Solar Edge, which controls each panel to 1 volt until the inverter is turned on, so that's a very safe way to manage wires. And the other systems I've installed used microinverters, which also manage the voltage for the panels individually until the system's connected. In this case, I'll be connecting 10 or 11 panels in series, give me 4 or 5 almost 600 volts in some cases. And this breaker system connected to a piece of DIN rail will allow me to switch off that connection at the array. So I can manage all of my wires in the building without worrying about having to touch something at that voltage. In addition to that, out at the array, I'm going to install a few surge protectors for lightning because some of the equipment that I'm installing, like the SunGold power inverter, don't have built-in surge protection. It even comes with a rain hood that protects it from the weather even more than the seal and everything that seals it in. I did add a couple of foam washers to the mounting bolts to actually seal those holes. And to mount it at my array, I just bolted on a couple pieces of unistrut to the 4 mount points, and I will just use some pole connectors in the unistrut, and that will allow me to hold it to the pole. I added a little bit beyond the box on one side that will help me with cable management. To connect the box going into the ground, I'm going to be using this expandable conductor. This was fairly expensive. It's like $25 for this 1-inch connector, but when I originally installed my array, I didn't have one of those, and someone in my comments told me about them. I didn't even know they existed. And that will allow the ground to move as the conduit expands and contracts and settles without putting undue stress on the box. I had a plastic box before and it cracked from the extra stress. So I want to mount it rigidly to the pole and then allow some flexibility with the conduit. So let's get it mounted up. I'm also going to install an additional one of these inside with other breakers that allows me to manage all of the configurations that I'm running inside the building. So one outside, one inside, lots to wire up. Let's get them connected so we can evaluate the performance of some of these new inverters.
This box has a convenient removable panel on the bottom, which makes it easier to drill all the necessary holes. I used a step drill to make the conduit hole. That was okay, but a punch-out tool would have been much easier. Then I just used standard cable glands for the PV wires coming from the array. My spare conduit was stubbed out into the old combiner box and didn't exactly line up with the location of my new box. So I used my conveniently portable Blue Eddy EB70S, which can power my heat gun on its low setting, to soften the conduit and make a double bend over to the new location. I used threaded connections on both sides of the expansion device to make it easier to reconfigure things later when I decide to do something completely different, like that would ever happen. The expansion joint made it very easy to feed all the wires through the hole even though the box was already rigidly mounted. I intentionally left some extra length on my conductors for future flexibility. With this larger box, there's plenty of space to coil them up and zip tie them out of the way.
I've made the series connection for all 11 bifacial panels going all the way down the line. However, I've left this final connection open so that while I'm working on the controller box, I don't have to worry about any voltage being on the lines.
You do not want the extension cables connected to the panels at this point. Only a few panels connected in series can produce high voltages and dangerous arcing. I can pass the extension cables through the cable glands and run them directly to the input side of the breaker. To start with, I'm only connecting one string of bifacial panels.
All right, back at the house, I stripped the ends of a black and red and a blue and black pair and connected them with a wire nut. And then I can just check for continuity at this end and find which pair those are. Because I have two colors, it cuts my number of trips in half. All right, I know that's a pair. And then I have one of these blue ones with one of the black ones. There we go. Okay, so there's my other pair. I'm gonna go ahead and put ferrules on the end of these just to make sure I don't have any connection problems. And then I already have string 1 and string 2 in my other box, so I'm going to label this string 3. Now, for safety, we need this box to be bonded to the rest of our grounding system, which I probably should have done before I started the rest of the wiring. But right now, you can see it isn't. So in order to fix that, I'm going to run some 6-gauge copper wire. I'm going to add a grounding bus bar and bond that to the rest of the system. That's about the biggest wire I can fit through that grommet. All right, now with our ground wire run and connected to the rest of the frame, I should get a beep. Look at that. All right, there we go. I'm working with EMP Shield for some high-level lightning protection, but until then, I have these inexpensive surge protectors that I can add. This surge protector has a connection for the DC plus and the DC minus, and then one for ground. And all it does is, if it sees a surge in power, it's going to direct all that to our ground bus, which will direct it directly into the ground and hopefully protect our equipment from the surge. Now, I have a clever way of doing this so I don't have to gang multiple wires under each terminal. Ganging multiple wires under a terminal is a good opportunity to have one of them be a less than ideal connection. Put that in upside down. Now I can connect to my Dinkel DIN rail. Now you can see I've put 2 black lugs next to each other and 2 red lugs next to each other. And with these jumpers, I can connect those 2 lugs, which essentially turns it into a mini bus bar. Now, with the meter, you can see that these 2 terminals are connected. Now I can make a connection to my surge protector off those secondary lugs, and everything will be nice and tight.
Then I can just make a short jumper to bond the ground lug on the surge protector to our ground bus bar.
Now I just want to make sure we're grounded. You can even connect off to the array somewhere. Nice. The PV distribution box in the house is very simple for the time being. I have 1 string of bifacial panels landing on a 1000 volt 20 amp breaker. That way I can easily disconnect the power from the array right here at the house without having to go out to the array. The output exits the box and currently goes over to my test site where I have the SunGold inverter mounted to a cement board. The rest of the conductors are looped up off to the side here with a couple zip ties for future use. To bond this box, I have added a grounding bus bar to the back plate, and I've used some green THHN grounding wire to connect that back to the grounding rod for the entire house. This is a great breaker to use for these kind of systems. You can get this one from Signature Solar. It comes with a lug on each side for feeding bare wire into, but I like to use the lug on the cables. They're much more secure. So I just removed the bare lug and use the bolt to attach. The nice thing about these breakers is it's a 2-pole 100 amp that's combined, allowing it to be used as a 200 amp breaker, which is the maximum that this system is set up to hold. It'll also provide a nice on-off switch for the battery if I want to do that independently. With the DIN rail, I can just snap it on there. And now that's in place, super easy. Then I'm just going to use a simple Victron shunt here on the negative cable. That will allow me to use the Bluetooth to manage and monitor the battery capacity and the amount of load that's going in and out of the battery. I'm working with 2-aught and larger cables now, and I got tired of trying to cut them with regular cable cutters. So I picked up this ratcheting cable cutter to try out. That was amazing! Oh, those are my new favorite cutters. In the manual for the SunGold inverter, it recommends using 3-aught cables, but you can't even fit 2-aught lugs through these holes because I tried. So I ended up using 1-aught cable, which is sufficient for the loads that I'll be running at. Plus, the terminals on my Power Queen server rack batteries can't hold anything larger than a 1-aught cable lug anyway. I connected the Power Queen server rack batteries in parallel using 1-aught cables. And then to keep them balanced, I took the positive cable off of one corner and the negative cable off the other. The positive cable runs through the breaker for easy disconnect, and the negative cable runs through the shunt. The positive sensing cable for the shunt runs to the battery side of the breaker. That way, I can leave the batteries on, and even if I disconnect the inverter, the shunt doesn't lose power. Having this breaker on here like this allows me to easily jump across it with a pre-charge resistor so that I can power up the inverter capacitors before switching on the breaker. These Power Queen batteries have been working just fine for me. I even tried connecting them without a pre-charged resistor. Woo! Wow. Just with that tiny little touch, you can see we had 193 peak amps. I got a dramatic arc, and the BMS disconnected the pack just like it should. Oh, before I forget, Power Queen offers my viewers a 3% discount site-wide if you use the link and the code in the description below. All right, now that all of the connections from the controller box here at the solar panel to the controller box at the house, all the way to the inverter have been made. All the breakers are off. I've confirmed all of the connections and all of the breakers are off. So now I can make this connection with the panel and safely confirm the power at each position as I flip on each breaker and work my way up to the inverter. It's very early in the morning and foggy, so I'll have enough light to see my voltage, but not a whole lot of power going through the system. So I have my meter set to DC volts. So I'm getting about 445 volts coming into my breaker. Now I can flip this breaker on, getting power on the back side, and I'm getting power through the Dinkel rail, back side of the Dinkel rail, on the back side of the lugs, to our surge protector. All right, we're in good shape at the array. Now go check the house. I can tell you I'm really happy with these boxes. They lock nice and tight, very secure. They're pretty nice. All right, we're back at the house. All my PV lines are run through metal conduit here. Breaker's all connected. Let's see if we have power coming from 443 volts, 0. Now the inverter is still off, so I can go ahead and flip this breaker. All right, now we're ready to turn on the inverter after we power it up. All right, with everything off, to power up this unit, I am first going to bring in AC power. Normally, I like to start with the batteries, but for some reason, this inverter doesn't like that. So the first thing I'm gonna do is turn on the AC input. That gives it power, and it can start up its software. Just takes a few seconds, power up, the screen is on. Now I wanna connect the batteries. Now, since I'm using this breaker with the lugs on either end of it, and right now I don't have them covered, I can use my pre-charge resistor with a couple of extensions on it. I can just jump her across this, and I can count to about 10 or so. That will pre-charge the capacitors for me, and then I can turn on the battery. The nice thing about doing it this way is I can leave the batteries on and I can disconnect the whole pack from the inverter anytime, but my Victron shunt is connected to the battery side of it, so it never loses power, even if I turn my inverter off. I just find that to be a much more convenient way to manage it. If the shunt loses power, then I am not 100% sure that it's tracking the capacity exactly right. Now I can flip on the output and we'll get some power rolling. All right, now everything else is connected. I can go ahead and flip on the PV. All right, there we have it. 440 volts for a split second there, and then it dropped down to 380 because it's putting out 86 watts. It's fluctuating, the voltage is fluctuating around as the PowerPoint tracker tries to find the most optimal power point. 200 volts at 72 watts. So there's not a lot of power coming in because it's almost completely overcast, but that is one of the things about this inverter that I found is really great. It will start up before my other inverters and close down way after, picking up as low as 14, 15 watts, because with 11 panels connected together and a startup voltage of around 100 volts, you know, I can get that really early in the morning and really late. Now, the amount of power I pick up for, 30, 40 minutes at 20 watts is not a whole lot, but, every watt counts. So the fact that you can pick up the very beginning and the very end of the day, that's just that much more power you can collect. Now I have 3 inputs converging on my AC combiner box. I have one breaker for my original SolarEdge inverter, one for my NEP microinverter system from the shed, and now an additional breaker for the SunGold inverter. I could run around to each one of these units and see how much power each one is producing, but that's a real pain in the butt, and each one has its own separate monitoring software. So monitoring all those systems independently is inconvenient. So I got another Emporia View and installed it in the combiner box. They're super easy to install, and now I can monitor how much power each system is producing at any given moment, as well as monitor long-term performance using the Emporia app. The SunGold inverter shows 2 output lines in the viewer because I'm monitoring both legs to track the balance between them. The one enhancement I would like to see is a method to nest multiple monitors together to show the combined power movement through all of my load centers. The system is quite accurate and not that expensive. I really like it. I'll link to it in the description if you want to get one. With all these combined power sources, it's good to check with a thermal camera for any anomalies. I took some images with this tiny little thermal imaging camera from Topdon. They have an Android and iOS version. They work really surprisingly well, with a reasonably high resolution picture and lots of features for checking highest temperatures and tracking temperatures throughout the image. Use the link in the description and click the $70 coupon to get it while it's on sale. Make sure you check compatibility with your phone. I had an older Android phone that I couldn't get to run the camera. The images look bright, but if you look at the readings, nothing is more than slightly warm to the touch. I appreciate SunGold Power sending out the PluePower IP6048 hybrid inverter for me to try out. And now that I have it hooked up and running for a few days, I thought I'd go over some of the initial pros and cons with you so you can make informed decisions on the hardware that you're purchasing. This inverter has a lot of things going for it. First, it is really inexpensive. It's just over $2,000, and that includes free shipping. And it's really hard to beat that price. It's a 6,000 watt inverter, and that's a pretty capable level. It can power most household appliances and even some large ones if you have a soft start or something to get it started up. It has 3 capable AC connections, the line in, a generator in, and a load. And the generator in can also be configured to be an output. One of my favorite things about this inverter is its 600 volt DC input. That allows you to have a lot of flexibility with your array configuration. It has 2 MPPT inputs, which allows you to have an east and west input if you need to, or like in my case, you might have 2 different types of solar panels, bifacial and regular, and you can put one on one input and one on the other. And it has a very good charge-discharge capability, allowing it to manage a very large battery bank. Now some areas that could use some improvement. This unit only has a 2-year warranty. And I suppose if you're just looking for the very lowest cost, that's okay. But it would be nice to see a warranty in the 5 to 10 year range to make it more competitive with others in the industry. The battery conversion efficiency is a little low at 91%. Some of the higher end inverters can achieve 96, even 98%. And the idle consumption is pretty high at 120 watts. Part of that's probably those really loud fans that are running most of the time. So if you're trying to run it off grid, you're going to lose a lot of your power in your battery conversion and your idle losses. So I would be more likely to recommend this unit for a grid tie situation with battery backup. That way your idle losses aren't such a big deal. This unit is pretty noisy. It has 2 fans and they seem to run almost all the time. When there's a lot of power coming in, they kick up pretty high and it sounds like I have a drone running in my garage. My SolarEdge inverter can put out 7.6 kilowatts and it's completely silent. It doesn't even have a fan. It doesn't seem like it would be that difficult to put some quieter fans in the unit. Now, if you're mounting it outside or in a shed or someplace where you're not going to be very often, then the loud fans don't matter. Finally, the biggest drawback is the tech support and documentation. The documentation for this unit is not very good. It's pretty difficult to figure out exactly what settings you need to change and what hookups you need to put in to make it do exactly what you want to do. And on top of that, the software that comes with it is pretty cumbersome. I had to go back and forth with tech support for several days just to get the software to work, and in fact, it wouldn't even work on my first computer. I had to use a different computer. The app connected right away, but the app doesn't have as much flexibility with changing the settings as the software does. Because of the software, documentation, and tech support issue, I wouldn't recommend this inverter for a novice. If you have some experience, you can probably figure it out, but expect to be a little bit frustrated in the process. The only issue I've had with running this unit so far is one day it shut itself off for a load imbalance. Now, it was in grid tie mode at the time, and I can't imagine how the load would have been so imbalanced that it couldn't operate. So I'm not exactly sure what happened. I reset the unit and it's run fine ever since. I'll try and add a note in the comments if I have any more issues. And if you have one of these units and you have some feedback on problems that you've had or solutions that you've come up with, be sure and leave them in the comments so other people can reference that. Well, my original system is nearly paid off now, and with my expansion, I am producing more power than I'm using virtually every month. What I need is a car company to sponsor me with an electric vehicle so I have some place to put all this extra power. Meanwhile, I did get an electric bike to test, and I'm setting up a configuration to run it on solar power, because that's what I do. Be sure to check out my website, projectswithdave.com, where I've been trying to organize everything I'm learning to make it easier to access and sort through. I have more than 6 months of projects stacked up, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss them. Have fun with your projects, and I'll see you next time.